Right. Hi, all. Welcome to the podcast. This is going to be one of many that we will be having. And of course, it's going to be in the nature of a friendly conversation between two friends to share our experience, knowledge on the industry. I'm Sam. I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years, working for product companies targeting enterprises and banks and such. And run a quick intro from your side.
Hey, thanks, Sam. So great to be on the podcast. And I mean, I guess like you, I too have been in software development services for, gosh, many years now, I guess, like almost quarter century. And yeah, so look forward to a cool conversation on the topic.
Yeah, one of many to come through. So, on today's topic, we are going to talk a little bit about something that is happening and then something I think everyone would be able to relate to. So, we are going to talk a little bit about AI. I know that you might have heard about AI enough in your life right now. You might have seen that topic coming through all the videos, like wherever you go, people talk about AI. But we are going to kind of derive from all the AI conversations that you might have seen. We are going to talk about something that directly relates to you. So today we are going to talk about how AI is going to be changing the future of user experience. All right. So as users, it's going to be you, me, everyone. So I'm going to try to align with what's happening, what to expect, and then probably tips and tricks to kind of have this experience a positive one for you rather than a negative one in the future. So, Ruan, where do we start?
Great topic. So I suspect a nice place to start, Sam, might be with a little bit of history, not going too far back, but if you think about like maybe, our lifetimes in software, right? Beginning, I guess, in the early 90s. So we have been accustomed to a certain paradigm of interacting with computers, right? And
Right.
so basically there was a previous generation of computers which some of us may have seen. I actually have seen some of those, those command prompt green screen kind of computers where, you have to type instructions and so on. And but of course, fortunately, is all that changed, and we had this really cool way of interfacing with computers and through computers to many other technologies, right? And that is the graphical user interface, right, or the GUI, right? And that was a massive revolution, and I think that although we all know about the GUI and its value, I think it's almost understated because through GUIs, I think the entire world changed. So let's think a little bit about that paradigm. So that paradigm actually existed, I think, from the early 80s until like very recently, certainly past 2020. I'm not sure when people began to think that paradigm might have changed, but certainly it was, maybe a couple of years ago at the earliest, right? So when you think about GUIs, the main thing to kind of observe is that I guess GUIs involve a structured way of interacting with information, right, in the computer. So we are very used to that, right? There are like, there is a app running in a browser or on some native environment, and there are like different pages, and in those pages we have different forms or action buttons or things like that, where the entire app is structured in a kind of a rational way to address the problem that the app is supposed to solve, right? So we can go into those different areas in there, and we can type in information, and maybe we can process information and get answers and so on, and it's all neatly structured, and it's quite convenient, right? So whether we think today of now, even today, almost all apps are still like that.
Mhm.
And we can for example think of something like a simple enterprise app like a HRMS or something like that, where you have list of employees, and there's a profile for each employee, and through the profile you can update information, and then you can tag certain other detailed information relating to that employee. So the concept of a master detail, right? Those sort of concepts which were probably borrowed from an earlier era through like databases and relational databases. So the similar structure was also presented in the GUI, right? So that is what we were used to. But now, right, we find that modern AI is able to very conveniently understand our intentions, right, as we speak or as we type, right? So that is a totally different ball game, and now that is where the opportunity lies, right? At a very fundamental level, that is where the opportunity lies, because like when a system can understand our intentions, then the system can go ahead and carry out those intentions in the same way that we naturally speak or think about them, right? So that is the starting point, Sam. I don't know if I'm making sense, but we could go into an example, I suppose. Would that make sense?
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So maybe let's consider a very simple example, right? So let's say now, even today, at least from the part of the world where I am, like let's say we want to do a bank transfer, right? So what we do is like we go into this web application, and then uh, we sign in, and we say that we want to do a transfer. So we navigate to the right place in that app, and then we fill out a form, right? And we pass through some kind of security checks. And then after that, the transfer is carried out, right? So that's what we do. I mean, even if we do it on a smartphone, it's very similar, except that probably your security aspects are taken care of through your face or face recognition or whatever, but it's very similar. But if you think about it, as human beings, what really matters might be a kind of a thought, right? And that would capture everything that matters to us. So a person might think like, hey, I was just talking to Jane the other day, and these days, she seems to be kind of having some economic hardships, and I'd like to help her out, right? Especially because her daughter is also doing some exams as well, and her expenses are high. I'm going to help her out. Maybe I just want to transfer 500 pounds to Jane immediately to cover some expenses she spoke of, right? And that's it, right? So that is our thought, right? So if we can translate that thought straight away into an action, right, where perhaps all that is necessary is a bit of conversation, right? Like, for example, to validate, like, hey, so is Jane like Jane Smith, right? Your friend from London? And then maybe, you'd say, yeah, of course it's her. And then is the amount 500 pounds? Can you confirm? And you say yes, and then the matter is sorted, right? So that's a really kind of a simple, lame example, right? But that is what we need. And if we carefully think about that, Sam, I think the amount of not only the time that is saved, but also the kind of mental energy, the unnecessary kind of screen time, and even a little bit of initial sort of, training to kind of understand the structure and the process of going through a GUI, most of that is removed. And, we have then apps which understand our purposes and interact with us, right? So that's a simple example. So, yeah.
No, I think, interesting thought, Rohan. And I agree on the transformation of ways we would interact with technology. Like back in the day, you would use inputs like a mouse or a keyboard where you could interact with technology. Like this is, I'm talking about decades ago. From there onwards, with the kind of incoming of smart devices, people transitioned into touch, where you would use inputs from your finger and you use your mobile device to kind of get things done. And then from there we had tablets where people kind of transitioned from laptops to touch media, which is like, having a reasonable amount of screen size. And then still that tactile kind of approach continued moving forward. I think as humans, we were all trying to find better ways to interact with technology from a long time ago. However, the progress or the change has been subtle, and then of course there's a reason for it. Like, you can't change how people would interact with technology overnight, or in a quick turnaround. It's going to take time, trial and error, and people of course going to take a lot of time to get adapted. I remember like when the touch devices came back in the day, people were like struggling to figure it out, and then not all the devices were capacitive touch, like they were resistive. So you ended up with a stylus, since your fingers were not accurate enough to kind of use those smaller controls. So from there onwards, like, things of course gradually improved over time, and then, people figured out how to use it in a proper way. And now people are like really robust in how that approach is. So from there onwards, so like a growth in conversational, I'm not going to use AI because like there were products in the market that are really famous, and even like vehicles about a decade ago started having like voice commands in their vehicles, but none of them were capable of understanding a conversational input. It was simply you speak a certain command and then the vehicle would respond, right? So it's a voice command than a conversation there itself. So people were kind of, I think, hinting towards this a long time ago. We simply didn't have the technological background or the infrastructure to continue this conversation or these voice commands into a conversational workflow. Now with the birth of AI, today I think we have that needed background infrastructure to kind of take it forward. Now you see even ChatGPT, or I don't want to go into brand names, but all those leading AIs still have a conversational button where you can interact with it with voice. So I think going forward, this will definitely be one way we would interact with technology moving forward, where we would start moving away from screens, which is power hungry, takes time, takes your attention to fully immerse in that, right? So you can't always do that. Like if you are doing something else, you need to fully focus on a screen or something to touch something, work on it. So how you interact is going to take a shift as well. So from a user experience point, you could expect, I believe, to have more verbal conversations, and there will be things like personal assistants inbuilt to your glasses, where you would simply walk with them. You have a companion, a friend to talk with, ask questions, clarify stuff, get information, which is like primarily is going to be a main point. And basically how we interact. And just to talk about information, back in the day when Google came, or even before that, we had a bunch of search systems. So we had something called like web indexes, actually before the search even. Yeah, you have like a yellow pages of web pages. You can just go from the letter and then figure out like what are the web pages within that category. Let's say food, like for example, right? like that. So from there onwards, we have Google and then so many other popular search engines, which works amazing. But how you would interact with it is going to be drastically different from the next couple of years, if not already. Because now you would see a AI search component inbuilt in these search engines. Like for example, in Google, you have AI mode. Instead of going through the top 10 results and then figuring out which relates to you the best, you can simply refine your query, refine the search output, and try to be smart about spending time on research, right? So that's the whole idea. There's another person doing that on behalf of you, and you don't have to spend going through 5 websites to figure out, oh, six one was what I was looking for. So, and that's going to be a huge shift in your user experience, how you deal with these technologies going forward. And I believe within the next couple of years, if not sooner, we will see these text-based search systems going to get faded away. They might exist. Usage is going to get reduced very soon, and then I think eventually they might deprecate it, right? So I think that might be something to expect. So the sooner you figure out how to deal with conversations, I think it's going to be easier to adapt into this new paradigm coming through. It's same as getting used to a touch device. You had to learn a little bit, you had to play with it, figure it out. There's a learning curve, of course. But the sooner you go there, it's going to be better for you, because that's where the world is heading. And eventually it might be a needed kind of requirement for your jobs to be employed, even, or even for education. That might be, part of a basic requirement. I remember about 15 years ago, organization wanted to include like a HR application or system that would help employees do things remotely. They actually had to provide a device. Now, pretty much everyone has a smart device, and then it might not be an expectation to have one, but everyone does, right? I mean, that's a given. So even how organizations and then employers approach employees might change in the future. So there might be certain expectations for you to have certain skills. There are minimum requirements, right? So I think that's another angle to think about. And I think being able to deal with a conversational AI and be able to ask the right questions, kind of drive it towards what you want, having that skill set is, I think, going to make you a more efficient person. Where another, let's say in a work environment, another colleague takes more time to research something, figure out things. If you are very smart about it, and then if you are using the right AI tools, you're going to, of course, stand out, right? I think as professionals, we should definitely start using it in a proper positive way to kind of make us more efficient, smart. And how we would approach our day-to-day work will also has to be aligned and changed with these newly available tools, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think those are few examples and then things you could look forward to. And then I have seen debates going on. Should children be allowed to have AI where they can copy homework or get the AI to do their homework? Where we are heading. To that, I have one comment. When I was small, we had phones in our home, like land phones, right? Back in the day, we didn't have mobile phones. And then if there were, they were like analog phones, like a size of a brick. And then only really wealthy people would have it. And, it was just like a status symbol to have a brick phone, back in the time. So what we did was when we were in school, we had these small books, the size of 2-3 stamps, to write down all the phone numbers of our friends. And at home or during vacation, when we want to call a friend, we would just take the book, look at the number, call them. And if not, the best couple of friends, you would memorize the number. You would know know it by heart. Okay, that guy, okay, this is a number. Now, but couple of years down the line, now what has happened? You don't even know your own number. You don't take that effort, right? Because everyone is interconnected through social media, everything, and you don't have that effort. There's no small book to kind of have those things. Everything is digitized. So I think that is where we are. So eventually, I think we have to evolve in like how we approach this, using AI to kind of refactor, reform your email to a client should be allowed in a safer environment, as long as the AI is implemented in the enterprise environment in a safer, ethical manner. I think those things should be allowed because it's going to make everyone better. Because instead of you spending 5 minutes to read, 5 or 10 minutes to read through an email, trying to find out that small grammatical mistake, it's going to save time, right? You don't have to do it. You knew it, but as humans, we do mistakes. I mean, that's why there's a term called human error. It's not machine error. So that is allowed for a certain degree for all humans. But what we are trying to do is we have this now layer, safeguarding layer, where we can improve on our inputs and then communication in a better, more efficient way where it's going to, save time. So what it should do is it should eventually allow the humans to do what they do best, focus on their creativity, all those things that, what makes us humans, right? So simple as that. So I think that is where we should kind of focus towards in the next 5 years. And then I believe that is where we are heading as well.
Yeah, no, and that's right, Sam. And also maybe since you mentioned the example of children, like, so of course there might be certain sort of considerations that need to be made when you think about children and how they interface with AI. But then, like, and certainly, and there are, like you, I see a lot of positives in that as well. So I, and that's a different sub conversation. Like, even like, I bet even our kids also, in spite of all these warnings and talk, they do interface with AI a lot, right? And it hasn't made them any worse, especially if the sort of basic guardrails are in place where, you don't get into some conversation where for whatever reason the AI that you are using is taking the child down some really dangerous rabbit hole. So if that bit of supervision is there, I think the rest of it so far, at least anecdotally, the experience has been positive. So that's very true. But in any case, I'm now as like, software guys who've been working with, like, enterprises and grown up environments, like, for years, I think there's no excuse to, like, hold back AI, because, like, even with the simple example you gave about the email, to even more complex examples like performing all kinds of different analyses, right? The type of thing we used to do using like a spreadsheet and stuff like that, where we had to worry a lot about the ultimately, what we had to worry a lot about is the way to interface with that spreadsheet. Not of like a programmer having to worry about his syntax and his, like that. In a lesser way, we spent a lot of time and effort to figure things out, how to use your spreadsheet when the problem is complex, right? Because there are various nuances to using that sheet. But now, if you have like a system that understands your intentions using whatever natural language you express, right? And that you rightly alluded to earlier also, when you said that, this is not about commands and prompts, right? This is not like the early days of the voice recognition and all that, right? So this is far gone beyond that, with the advances in LLMs to what they are today. It's all about being able to capture those intentions, and then a huge amount of, like, what I personally see as useless effort for adults, right? Because that is unnecessary. If we can perform the analysis and get our outcome on the spreadsheet, then our minds will be focused on how we are going to use that, because we want to find out a certain fact, and then we find it out very quickly, and now we are challenged with how we are going to use that, right? And that is,
Yeah.
I think, the basic game that we play in office environment, except that we play that other game of trying to battle with the spreadsheet, which is useless, right? So, but the same challenge, Sam, and I think you also can and chip in with your views, but the same thought cropped up to me when we think about like enterprises and business processes, and the whole way in which people interact with their suite of applications in the office, giant enterprise, and there are various departments and focus areas and different kinds of business processes running, right? Then again, right, what we thought of until recently as very cool, right, that we have these, structured systems to work with, where you log in and maybe you're lucky you have a neat single sign on, and there are about 10 or 15 different apps or modules. And depending on your need, you navigate your way there and you capture information in a structured way. You finish one form, or maybe it's a flow or a process, right? And then you step into the next one and so on. Was very cool, but even things like that are not as intuitive as the way we would get help. Let's say if we were speaking to somebody who is vastly more knowledgeable than us, right? The way we would get help with such an entity would always be so much more efficient. And we know this sometimes even when we interact with like good mentors or teachers, sometimes they'll be able to do all that processing for you. They'd understand your intention and then give you back the answer in a way that you'd be well educated with that answer. So that's what we need. Or in the case of an office, where whatever that activity you want to carry out is smoothly carried out through conversation. So I can think about this using like a very simple scenario again. Like if you think about like the most common shared service across all enterprises, something like human resources, right? So that's a place where we dedicate like a good 3 or 4% of our time in any office interfacing with, right? It may be to keep our profiles update, process certain claims, go on vacation, right? So at any point, or to understand certain things about our salaries or whatever, we go through these systems, right? And now there again, right, if you pick out a very tiny process which we are so familiar with and which is almost like a hack or a trope, if you think of something like applying for leave, right? The fact remains that there's a lot to improve, and AI can, right? Because like if you could just, right, like you mentioned earlier, have your virtual assistant, right, your virtual office companion, and you could just say that, by the way, you know I plan to take off about 2 weeks in the latter part of December. Uh, and, wonder if I could be able to do that. And then, the background is processed by the AI and you get your possible combination of leaves, right? And how you could apply, and a suggestion that you go ahead and you apply for leave, like you take your annual holiday and a couple of other casual holidays, put them together, and you know you take your leave and you give approval to that, and that's it, right? So it's something which could be very interactive, and also it could be very proactive, because the AI could actually remind the people who are to approve your leave to approve it, and then once it's done, it could tell you that the problem is sorted. It could book your calendar and maybe set up the out of office message and everything, whatever that needs to be done. So it's like, great convenience. Now that's a very kind of a, mundane-ish or administrative example, but those are the types of things that I hate to say this, but waste time, right, in office, right? So we don't need to. So yeah, I mean, so there's something like that. And also, sir, maybe I'll let you start up on one thought that came to my mind as a result of this, and then I'll also pitch in afterwards with my thoughts. That was like, also this business of rolling out AI in an enterprise might be a little different from how you would like just use at home, like your DeepSeek or your GTP or whatever. It might be a bit different, right? Because we have all these different departments and systems and all to consider. So maybe there's some challenges around that as well. I was wondering whether maybe you had a thought there.
Absolutely, Ron. So I think, as you correctly mentioned, when it comes to an enterprise, one of the current existing challenges is that you would end up having multiple systems platforms from different designers which do not interconnect or talk with each other in a granular level. Of course, in a high level, they might be able to talk and share the basic information, or you might be able to export and upload or even manually intervene to kind of get things interconnected. But from a granular level, none of those things would work together. So still employees are kind of expected to interact with different platforms, systems, and then to get their work done. So the simple example you used to run, like taking a leave itself, still people will have to log into a platform. They will have to select their leave types, dates, and everything, and then go through it. So from there to all of their day-to-day activities of an employee, there will be so much more platforms coming through. And I think in an ideal scenario moving forward, there should be a connecting layer on top of all of those platforms that employees would interact, and that platform would, as in a holistic view, provide and will be able to cater to most of the business functions, right? So I think that's what we should look forward to, and then that is how where we should, I mean, the future should be leading to. Even though we have seen that enterprise platforms have started coming up with their own AI kind of interaction, like, to make things better. Again, the problem still persists where you will end up having multiple AI platform systems you have to deal with. And then again, that information flow is not unified. Like, you will have to, there's no connectivity between them. What you told to bot number A, you will have to explain to bot number 2 to kind of get things done, or system number 2, whatever, right? So that problem stays there. So I think, Ruwan, this can be a excellent topic for a podcast, like, like our second episode. I think we are on time now, about half an hour. Where someone would tolerate us? So I think this could expand into a wonderful next episode where we talk about enterprises and specifically target about their platforms, how things could have been done better, or like, what to expect, etc. What do you think, Roy?
For sure, definitely. We'll do this in slow stages, and that will help us to also jog our minds and come up with some cool ideas for the next topic on the enterprise side of things, how to roll out AI. So yeah, so great, and I think it's great to have had this conversation, and as a starter to hopefully what is a cool series.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Hope you did as well. So again,
Definitely.
thanks for staying with us. And look forward to having you on our future sessions as well. Thanks all.